Hello, everybody. Today we are debunking color myths. Welcome to Art Prof. We are a global art party. Let's get started with myth number one, which is that to do color, you have to start with black and white. Who here has heard this myth before, and in what context? Have you heard this before, Kat?
Not in the context of color specifically, but I feel like I have been fed this lesson when I first started off drawing from observation is for some reason every art teacher wants you to start off with graphite or charcoal. But as for color, that's actually pretty new to me. I've never heard this myth in regards to color. What about you, Clara?
I've heard it a lot in terms of painting. There is a whole tradition of grisaille, which is a painting technique where the underpainting is done in black and white, and then you add the color on top. It's more involved than just painting it gray. It's like you're painting the painting gray, and then you're putting the color on top. And I just know that me living in the world of black and white drawing media for so long sort of screwed me over. I really wish I had started learning color sooner. I just felt like I was told you have to learn how to draw before you learn how to paint, and you can't start until you have those black and white drawing skills. And I actually think in retrospect it screwed me over.
That makes sense. And I think it actually goes in line with what I was saying just now, which is when I started officially learning drawing from observation, I also just started with black and white drawing media. For some reason, that seems to be the standard. But if you want to learn how to use color, then you have to use color. You can't just do black and white and think you will eventually lead up to color. But to be fair, I think that black and white helps in finding value, such as light and dark value. Colors also have value, light and dark value. They also have warmth and coolness as well. But you're juggling a lot more with color, but you can't learn color just from black and white media. You also have to indulge in the color.
When I think about foundation year in art school, we didn't do any color. We did a little bit in 2D design. I know when I was at art school in the olden days, we were doing those gouache color charts, but we never really went beyond that. So for me, there was this huge disconnect between, okay, learning to draw with charcoal, learning value in lighting, and then these color swatches. Does anybody
Mm.
here know ColorAid? I always felt bad for the class that had to buy ColorAid because it was like $85 for like a little stack.
I actually don't know what color aid
Oh,
is. I've
you
never
never
heard
heard
it
of
before.
ColorAid? It's really, really pricey.
Okay.
Jen says, when I was first taught how to digital paint, they taught us to do it all in grayscale and then paint color over it, but it came out so muddy looking. Yeah, because for me, I feel like why do we need to do that? Like, shouldn't I just go straight into the color? But I feel like the art world is known for being told people, you can't do this until you do this. And I just think that's a really closed minded way to think about how to learn something.
I agree. It's also about balance. You can't just do one thing in isolation and expect to learn a bunch of things from doing one thing. You have to sort of dip your toes in a lot of medias and ways of working and color, essentially. But I understand a lot of people getting hung up on the idea of black and white first and then color. It almost feels like a sketch for your value distribution later. But I also agree with, was it Jen Noel who said that? I agree that it also muddies up the color, honestly. If you have black and white underneath color, it's going to look dead-ish when you mix the black with color.
Tell us in the comments, how would you say your skill set is in color? Because people use color across all fields. And I really regret that I didn't draw with color first. That to me is the perfect bridge. You have somebody who's really good at charcoal drawing and you want to paint, And if you have that person draw with color, for me, that was what clinched it. And for so long, I was drawing in charcoal and oil painting, and I wasn't doing that in between phase. And that really helped for me. Myth number 2, color matching is important to learn. What we mean by color matching is if I have a orange cup and I'm painting it, it would mean I have to match the exact color of the cup, be able to mix that color and put it into the painting. Why do you think people feel that this is such an important skill?
I think a lot of people crave control, and a lot of art processes are really out of your control at the end of the day. You can be as precise as you want it to be, but it's an organic medium that will behave in the way that it behaves. And your hand in it is just to change, manipulate, and experiment with the media. I think also for some reason people are saying that color matching is important because it feels very concrete. They say if you can mix this one color and you can mix it again, it means you're good at color. But that's not really the case. It's much more complicated than that. And I feel like people don't actually delve into the complicated nature of color, which is you put one color next to another color and it suddenly changes. You take that color, you mix it a little bit with white versus a Naples yellow. That totally transforms what direction it goes in. Saying that you have to color match is kind of a very simple way of understanding color, which is not the correct way. Color is far more complex than that.
I think it rewards precision. And precision, to me, is really not that important. If I'm painting something, I find it way more interesting when the artist messes with the colors and creates a different effect. I think that's where color gets really exciting. And what I find about color matching as well, and tell us in the comments, how many of you guys here feel color matching is important or not, and why, if you feel like you can do it. I don't think I can do it, Kat. Like, if I sat down and tried to do it, I think it would take me so long. And even then, like, what's really the value that I could color match this pink?
I have seen those videos on social media, and also let us know in the comments if you've seen these videos of people perfectly color matching a color paint swatch. Like they will have the paint swatch and then they mix a bunch of colors on the palette and eventually they take that paint and put it on the swatch and it's an exact color match. I'm like, that's really cool. That's really fun. It makes for a flashy social media photo or video. But what else are you going to do with that? Are you just going to exactly color match the blush on someone's cheek versus the shadow on their forehead? And that's how you paint every single time? You can't color swatch an entire image. It's just far too complex for that. You just have to lay a color down and then work with what you've got.
Or I think sometimes people say, well, if I can't color match this precise yellow, it's going to ruin my painting because I'm going to put down a color and it's not quite that exact color. Oh my gosh, it's all over. My painting's going to look terrible because I couldn't get it and it's a little bit more yellow. But the thing is, for me, when I'm painting with color, I want variation. I don't want all my colors to be the same. And that's my other reason for why I just don't think it's that important. Super time consuming. And it's not really something that helps you interpret color as an artist, which is a whole other thing. Comment from Lisa, who says, I believe teachers start you in black and white to keep students from getting overwhelmed. Well, the thing is, though, Kat, I think there is value in just throwing a student off the cliff and letting them figure it out. Or maybe I'm just really mean.
That's definitely your way of teaching, Clara. Sometimes I really felt like that when I was a student in your class, but I figured it out. But I do understand where Lisa's coming from. I think that to start someone, yeah, start them in black and white. I think that's actually a perfectly reasonable approach. I mean, when I teach drawing, I always start my first few assignments in black and white. It's simpler, it's a more accessible entry point. But I think the key thing here is that I make sure they don't stay in black and white. I make sure that they do branch out into color. I think it becomes a problem when black and white becomes a crutch. All you can do is black and white because that's what you feel most comfortable with. That's what you feel safe with. But you can't learn and grow if you always feel comfortable and safe.
Brian says knowledge of color is a second language, almost interchangeable with sarcasm. Well, that would make me an absolute genius of color, which I know is definitely not the case. Comment from Karasu, who says, I always feel like color looks bad in my marker drawings. Well, this is a really good question, Kat, because we've all been in a situation where we're like, oh, I don't like the color. But I think a lot of us, sometimes we can't explain why the color looks bad, and then we don't know how to fix it. So do you have any tips for that?
I think that might be one of the overarching reasons for why your color might look bad in your marker drawings is because you don't feel like you have control over that color. When you have a marker that is a certain color, you don't get to change it. That is the color that you get and you have to use. And it feels a little debilitating when you're not able to change that color. But at the end of the day, it's something that you have to work with. And so, what are you going to do with the problem that you face? You have to challenge it. I remember one time I had to do a plein air drawing, and I really wanted the foreground tree to be dark. But my darkest color was a deep magenta. And a tree is not a magenta color. But I really wanted to bring that richness and the value of the darkness out. So I ended up coloring that entire foreground tree magenta and started putting the magenta in other places that I felt could be darker, that could warrant that shadow. And I was very insecure about it at first. I thought, oh, it's going to be a trash drawing, whatever, I'm just going to put it in. And my friends actually really liked it. They thought it was really fun and experimental and also innovative because it's not often that they see a foreground tree this deep a magenta.
I think it's just really hard to identify what makes a color scheme successful. Because I think most of us can look at a piece and go, oh, wow, I really like the color. But as far as breaking down what the artist is doing to create that color scheme, I think that's the part that's very difficult for people. Tell me in the comments, do you guys feel like you have a pretty good sense of what is a successful color scheme? Because naturally, everybody has a different definition of that. But I think that's one of the hardest things. And I remember feeling like, I don't know why that's good. Somebody tell me. It was very confusing and hard to understand. Myth number 3, the more colors, the better in an artwork. Why do you think people think this?
Well, I think a lot of people just think more is better. More is more. And sometimes that's applicable, but other times it could actually become a crutch if you're not using color with intention. You just put down every single color that you have in your toolkit and just assume, I know a lot about color because I'm using every single color. But just because you can use all the colors doesn't mean you should. It's good to be able to lay down a color with forethought. So why are you putting down that color? Is it for the value? Is it for the warmth? Or is it literally for the color? You need a yellow here.
There is that phrase, limited palette, which we hear all the time. I think we should stop calling it limited palette because the word limited, it sounds like it would constrain you somehow to use that limited palette. But I think limited palettes, a lot of the times, is the way to go. There are not a lot of paintings I see that have a million colors that look really good because when you have that many colors, it's almost like you're chopping your painting up into all these
Mm.
little pieces and then you lose that sense of cohesion. But if you pick a color scheme, let's say you base it on these 3 colors, instantaneously that's more cohesive than if you just pick any random color off the palette. Although I was proud of myself, I did that tree painting and there are a million colors in that painting. But I did that because I have a color issue where I just love black and white. I love monochromatic schemes. And I was like, oh, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm actually going to do like more than 2 colors this time. Well, do
Well, I
you
think
like?
it's also good to look at your body of work and realize what tropes you're falling into. So if you find yourself always using every single color in the palette and you look at your body of work and you say, hey, they all look pretty similar color wise because none of them have a cohesive color scheme. Then going forward, maybe you can say, I'm going to do a complementary color scheme of yellow, blue, yellow, purple. Oh my gosh. Yellow and blue are not a complementary color scheme. I just said blue. I don't know why. Yellow, purple. And disrupt the patterns that you've fallen into because it was comfortable and you didn't have to think too hard about it. Disrupt them.
Randy's asking, when you're drawing and painting skin, do you avoid trying to find the color of the skin?
Do I avoid trying to find the color of the skin? Yes and no. um, I do try to avoid it. So yes, because skin has so many different colors mixed in that to find the one color for the skin is impossible because my cheeks are different from my forehead, which is different from my lips, from different from my neck, different from my hands. It all changes. But when I avoid trying to find the color of the skin, I'll say no also to play devil's advocate. I'm still trying to get the right skin type for each person. So someone who has more melanated skin versus someone who is much paler, I'm still trying to clock that at least, trying to find each person's unique shade and identity as well. So this is a yes and a no answer.
My answer is that it's not so much that you need a color for any particular part of the face, but that you need layers of several colors to create that. Because if you think about skin, that's what it is. It's multiple layers of skin, and they're all translucent, and they're all a slightly different color. And so even if you just, I color matched that one spot on the cheek, it doesn't really translate well because it's not layered. It's just like one straight color. So that's another thing that I see a lot with color is people want to just get that color. And I don't do that. I usually put down a color. I say, okay, that's about it. Now I'm going to put a glaze. Okay, that's getting a little closer. Maybe it needs a little bit more brown. And so I don't really think about colors as that color as much as it is, okay, this color is the starting point. Do you layer in your color work, Kat?
Oh, for sure. I think that's actually a very good point, especially when it comes to oil painting, particularly, because colors, when you look at an oil painting, you can kind of just sense that it's one with a lot of depth, one where the artist has certainly layered a whole bunch. It's very different from, say, watercolor. I think with watercolor, the point of it is not to layer, but try to get the one color down immediately and let it speak for itself, and then put the next color down next to it. So there is a lot of depth with color depending on what you layer on top of each other. I think a really good starting point, I'm sure there's a video that we've done about it on Art Prof, but putting down the opposite color of what you expect as toning your canvas and then painting on top. So toning it, for instance, blue to eventually create an orange scene. I think a lot of that blue makes the orange more unexpected, somehow a little bit more brown, a little bit more violet. It's a little bit hard to pin down. And I actually think that's a good use of color, which is layering and making those unexpected moments.
The next one, mixing paint will get faster with more experience. I know this happens a lot with beginners. In the beginning, you are not very skilled and it takes you a long time to mix colors. And people will say to me, oh, when I'm better at this, this is going to go so much faster. I'm like, no, it's the opposite. It's actually going to be slower. Why do you think that is? Because typically, when we get better at a skill, we are more efficient, usually.
Well, when it comes to color, it's so incredibly complex that the more you understand it, the more time you will want to take with it, actually. Because to be able to just lay down a color super fast and not having to mix, well, you better just use marker or something. When you have paint, more knowledge equals more ways it could go in different directions. So I think a lot of the times people are experimenting as they go along with the color.
Good point from Lisa. I've met several artists who can't move into color or even another medium because they hate being bad at something. I think we've all been there, that awkward phase. We feel like we're never going to learn how to do it. And it's easy for us to say, oh, just keep practicing. But I don't think that's it. I think there are other things you can do to be okay with making that really bad work. What would you suggest?
I would say just keep making work and then maybe a year down the line look back on your work and say, hey, that wasn't so bad after all. I feel like I was too lost in the process to truly take a step back and understand the merit of my work. I think that's happened to me quite a few times. I get so frustrated with a drawing. For instance, that drawing I was talking about earlier with the magenta tree. In the moment, I was so frustrated with that. Even when my friends told me, wow, I actually really like it, I was like, you're lying to me. Can't you see that this is bad? And I looked at it a year later and I thought, hey, that actually is not so bad. It actually looks good.
Another thing to think about color mixing, I think sometimes spending more time on the color mixing, it can save you time later because I pre-mix my colors. Tell me in the comments how many people here pre-mix colors, how many people mix on the go, or maybe some of you guys do a little bit of both. And of course, it depends on what you're doing. Oil paint, you really can just sit and do that all day because it doesn't dry quickly. Acrylic, you can't do that so much. But I find when I take the time to get a really good palette of the colors I need, it means I don't have to mix so much. Because if I'm trying to just do one at a time, I find that that's very difficult because it disrupts me using my brush. Oh, I got to stop and mix this. And that to me is very inefficient because if I can just have my colors and just paint with the brush, it's like that actually helps me get into a good flow. I don't have to feel like I have to stop every 2 seconds to do something.
Well, I think it's also just about process. The more you realize that perhaps mixing beforehand will help, and then applying it on the canvas, then you can get into, I don't know, a flow state where you don't have to mix and interrupt your painting process. But I think for other people, you might just have to mix on the way.
Right.
Ultimately, you will be mixing along the way. I find for myself, I do tend to mix maybe like 3 colors, and then I start to paint with those 3 colors. And if I need more, then I will make more eventually. But I just need to start at a certain point.
Jennifer is asking, will you please explain what is in the color ebook that you get for $25? I haven't had experience with ebooks. Well, first of all, if you guys sign up for the early bird discount, that is expiring at 9 o'clock. That's in about 35 minutes. So if you want to get that early bird discount, get it for $20 instead of 25, you guys should go down to the description and do that right now because you're running out of time to get that early bird discount. Of course, you can get it later on. The price will be $25. And basically, what you guys are going to get is a layout that looks like this. So it's a PDF format, and you can scroll through it. There's links in it. There's videos that are embedded in there that you guys can watch. It's the videos that are already on our YouTube channel. But Kat, what I have found very helpful about a book form is there's an actual sequence because we have a table of contents. You can go back and say, oh, I want to go back to the muted color section. We do have a color area on our website, but it's just like all these videos. And I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. But we did structure the ebook to have a linear sequence of things built on top of each other. Like, for example, the beginning of the ebook is just a big overview because color is so detailed. But I also think color sometimes it's like your mindset, like how you're thinking about it.
I totally agree. And I think we were talking earlier about how it's easier and simpler and perhaps more accessible to just get a student started with black and white work. That's true. But then after that, how do you get started with color? there's really no set formula. And to your point, Clara, it really is a mindset thing. For some people, maybe they're stuck on a monochromatic color scheme and you have to get them to use every single paint swatch in their toolkit. For other people, they're using every single color, so you actually have to get them to be simpler. So for each person, it's incredibly different. And I think what's really rewarding about the ebooks is that there is a sequence to this. There is a step 1, step 2, step 3 that are generalized that you can also adapt to each of your individual needs.
Another thing that I think makes our ebook very different is it's written by 7 people. Most color books that are out there are written by one person. The classic Joseph Albers color theory book. I know James Gurney has a fantastic book called Color and Light. Those are all fantastic books. I'm not saying that they're not wonderful, but I guess what I learned, Kat, as we wrote the ebook together is just how personal color is. That everybody has such a different experience. And it's not like, oh, I knew everything and you guys were just repeating what I already knew. No, you guys were like telling me about that time you did that magenta painting and this didn't happen and this is how you fixed it. And so that's another thing about the ebook is a lot of it is told as a personal story. And for me, that makes it more human instead of this like horrible color chart that's like making me want to barf.
Well, I think it's also just a demonstration of each of our paths researching color, essentially, which is finding out, messing around and finding out for ourselves with the color, which I think ultimately saves other people a lot of time. If we say, hey, maybe magenta in the foreground isn't such a bad idea, I have this experience to back me up. Maybe you can save yourself the trouble and just do that right immediately without having to talk yourself out of it and then talk yourself into it. Being able to relate with other people's experiences will ultimately help you expand your vocabulary in color.
Myth number 5, I need to be able to make up colors out of my head. Why do you think people feel that this is important?
I think, again, people love precision, such as color mixing, as color matching, or just making up a color and saying, hi, I have this color in my head, I can immediately put it down on the paper. Again, it's a precision issue. But really, color is a lifelong endeavor. To say that you can color match or make up a color immediately is kind of diminishing the experience of color. A lot of color is experimental, a lot of color is unpredictable, and you have to embrace the unpredictability of it.
Well, this is related. Karasu says, I can't visualize things the right color in my head. For example, if you tell me to visualize an apple, I see it bright blue in my head. I mean, that sounds kind of cool, Karasu. I'd love to see that bright blue apple, but I hear this a lot for other subjects as well, is people say, well, I can't do the thing that's in my head. I can't get the drawing image to look like that. And that's where my suggestion is, well, then don't have an image in your head because you're just going to be disappointed every single time if you have an image already and you want it to be like that. Because number one, it never comes out the way you want it to. But I love that about being an artist. So when I sit down to paint, I'm surprising myself the whole way through. And the paintings never come out what I think they will come out like. And I think that's a hard thing to embrace sometimes, but ultimately it does really free you up.
I think also having the idea that you have to match what's in your head often makes people freeze up and not make anything at all. So I totally agree with Clara in that just get rid of that fantasy in your head because at the end of the day, it's a fantasy. What really matters is what you can actually just get out. So go ahead and lay that color on the paper. Go ahead and just pull up your sketchbook and scribble something because now you have something versus other people who don't have anything and maybe have the perfect image in their head. Well, what does it matter if you can't get it out?
Like Nez here says, you can freely experiment and note new things you discover. Exactly. I think the second we start worrying about color matching and accuracy, it really limits what you can do with color. Myth number 6, there's no way those artists were thinking of that. Here's what we mean by that. If you have, for example, you go to the museum and you look at my painting, which is in the museum now, right, everybody? Okay. I used to look at stuff with my professors in art school, and they go really deep. They'd be like, oh my gosh, look at that saturated blue and how it's juxtaposed against this alizarin crimson, blah, blah, blah. And I used to listen to my professors, and my whole reaction was, you're reading way too much into that. There's no way those artists were thinking that deep into their color. They probably just made colors that they liked and got into the creative process. Like, I never believed that artists thought about color that much. Did you have that reaction, or is this just me?
What did I think? I think what I realized was that there was certainly a methodology to color, even if it is instinctual. So for some reason, yellow and purple look really good together, next to each other, not mixed together, next to each other. And the reason for that is because of complementary color schemes. And the reason your painting looks so good, Clara, is because the red and the green are right next to each other. It's a complementary color scheme, but you're also involving all of these other softer colors, like a green that's more desaturated ultimately looks a little blue, or a red that's more desaturated looks perhaps even a bit orange. And you're actively using the bright and the dark values of each color to show light and shadow. So a lot of things that come out instinctually often have rhyme and reason to them, often have repeated motifs that other artists have used in the past. And it is worthwhile to delve into the thought process of the artist to really put together the logic behind the colors, because it's not just magic. There's a reason why things look good. And to be able to understand that logic, you need to be able to talk about it. And I think that's what your teachers were doing at the end of the day, Clara, which is talking about why things worked.
I feel like it's the opposite, that the artists were probably thinking about color 10 times more than the depth that my professor went into. I feel like what really happened in the artist's head with color is probably my professor just skimming the surface of the depth of that, because I've had those conversations with artists where it's just like that little thing, and we're talking about it for such a long time. I'm not saying every single artist works that way, but I think what I've started to realize is that, especially for somebody like me, like I'm sort of insecure about my color, I feel that when I paint, I need to be able to back up why I'm doing things. Like, if I can't justify it to myself, I can't justify doing it. And I think for me, it's a matter of feeling like, here's the result I was trying to get, and I know the mechanics to how to get that result. And for me, that was empowering. That was like, oh, I kind of do know about this. We have also myth number 7. I have to make artwork with bright colors to show that I'm good at color. Where do you think this comes from?
Well, it kind of goes into the same point earlier about I need to use every single color in my piece to show that I'm good at color. And I think it's just someone being flamboyant and flaunting color, whereas someone who is intentfully using color for a specific purpose. So bright colors and a lot of colors are flashy and fun and do well on social media, honestly.
Why do you think I'm
Because
wearing this shirt?
yeah, I should take a note from you, actually, Clara. I should wear brighter colors. But I'm going to be honest. I think a lot of people who are just casually, brainlessly scrolling through social media are not thinking too hard about the color of things. They're like, oh, that's bright and is eye candy. I'm going to like that. But for instance, to be able to portray a certain emotion, to be able to portray different color transitions, it has to do with nuance. It can't be too obvious. It has to be something that's used intentfully and discreetly and with so much purpose. If you have to use a saturated color there, why are you using it and how are you using it? Other than that, how are you transitioning from this color to another? And what does that mean for the piece? Does the piece have a gloom to it? Is the piece about nostalgia? All these nuanced storylines require a nuanced use of color.
Actually, one of the places that I've seen some of the most masterful color situations, this is going to sound really weird. It's been in black and white media where I've seen such a beautiful richness of color in a very limited value range. Because I don't know if some of you saw that photo gravure video that we produced. It was step by step. It was with Ralph Robinson. You guys should look it up. It's one of my favorite processes that we've ever documented. And a lot of people, I think if you're not looking carefully, you'd go like, oh, that's a photo. But it's not. It's an intaglio print. And I got to see them in person. Oh my God, there were so many colors in that image. Now on social media, you might just say, oh, it's a black and white photo. When I saw that, I could not believe the color range that was in that quote black and white image. And the thing is, just because it's loud, bright colors, it doesn't mean that is a more sophisticated way of using color. You could argue the opposite. I'm just trying to get your attention, right? And maybe you've thought more carefully about your color choices today with what you're wearing.
But hey, you're using a bright color with a lot of intention, Clara. I think it comes across.
But I think that saturated colors, they're very easy to catch your eye. So you could look at, let's say, a painting in a gallery and it's like super, super bright. And immediately you're going to go to that piece because it's so big and bright. And if you have like a black and white print next to it, I think we all know we're going to look at that giant magenta painting first. But that doesn't mean that the giant magenta painting is actually that interesting in terms of color.
I think a sign of a really good piece is you want to keep looking at it for longer and you start to see more the longer you look at it. So, for example, in that gravure piece you were talking about, Clara, the longer you looked at it, the more you realized just how many colors were being used in that piece. At a glance, it looks like black and white, but the longer you look, the more you discovered. And I think that's also the beauty of color in a piece that's more nuanced. If it's just straight up magenta, I don't know why we keep going back to magenta as our big bright color.
Lime green.
Lime green, sure. Magenta and lime green painting. Well, I mean, if it's just the two colors and you're using just bright colors everywhere, I kind of get the point from a first glance. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to learn anything more here about the narrative of the piece, the color transitions, anything else. The longer I look at it, I just one and done. It's exactly like social media. But a piece that has a lot of minute colors, I think, invites a viewer to stay with that piece longer.
Going back to that question about skin tones, and by the way, everybody, pop those questions into the chat. It is very helpful for us if you type question in all caps so we can have an easier time finding it. And if we miss your question, feel free to just post it again. So Jordan is asking, in relation to skin tone, what would be the best tone to start with? Ochre, umber, or pinkish?
Oh, that's very different for each person. I don't think you can start with a single color for any one person. For instance, someone who is more melanated versus someone who is much paler, you would start with very different colors for each one. Someone who is paler, perhaps pinkish. Someone who has darker skin, maybe ochre or umber. But even someone who's pale has different warmth to their skin tone. So even though someone can have white, bright, pale skin, it could be more blue toned, or it could be more pink toned, or it could even be more yellow or orange toned. It is entirely different from person to person, but that's also the beauty of color and seeing the differences of each person is being able to honor those differences as well.
Another thing to consider for skin tone is light. You could have the exact same person, put them in two different lighting situations, and their skin tone will be totally different. So that's the thing is I think oftentimes we're trying to match, okay, this pink cup, But if I put this pink cup underneath a fluorescent light, it's going to look very cool and very blue. Now, if I put my desk lamp on, it's a very yellow light. This might even end up looking a little bit more orange. And so that's where I think color does actually get very complicated, because you have to understand how light works, because light is all about color. And that's something which I think doesn't get brought up enough. We also have from Nixie, who says the nuanced color example is really great. Well, I think so much of color is you have to train your eye. I bet you anything, if you'd showed me that photogravure when I was 8, I would have been like, oh yeah, it's black and white. Like, I'm not going to look very carefully. But I think after you've looked at a lot of artwork in person, you start to see those nuances. And to me, that is a big part of your artistic education. Tell me in the comments, have you learned something about color when you saw something in real life? Because Kat, for me, oh my God, first time, saw a Rembrandt painting. I'd seen them a million times in textbook. You're like, oh yeah, Rembrandt, right? But then you go and you're like, what? You just like want to cry, because I don't know, it's like more real than life. I know that sounds really strange, but yeah, does everybody?
Clara's at a loss of words. So momentous. But I totally agree. I think that you have to be able to see a painting in person to really see the details. So much gets lost in the screen. And even if you have the highest resolution photo and photo edited image possible of a painting and you can zoom in, well, even if you zoom in, you're going to look at that thing in isolation on your screen. Whereas you go to a painting in real life, well, you can look closer, look farther. It's so much easier to see everything in context. And it's such a overwhelming, inspirational, momentous moment to be present with something like that.
We also have a comment from Choppers. I wonder how people develop knowing how to differentiate color. I don't think we can at an early age. And if correct, then how could one learn to better define color as an adult?
Well, it's as we said earlier, Clara, I think everyone has such a personal relationship with color. I'm going to give also another example. Someone who is colorblind has such a unique relationship with color. They can only see a certain spectrum of colors, and therefore they would want to use certain spectrums of colors, which I actually think is really eye-opening as someone who is viewing the artwork of someone else who is colorblind. I think, wow, I would have never thought to use that collection of colors together. And it's such a personal choice. It's so much based on your own experiences.
Nixie is asking, what would you say to students who don't usually experiment with color? How are some ways we can be less afraid to incorporate color? Get some markers, crayons, any drawing material where the color's already there. And you have to use that. In paint, I don't have to do that. I can just say, oh, I'm going to squeeze out some white paint, some burnt sienna. Okay, that's it. I'm fine. But when you've got bright green and turquoise crayons, you have to deal. And I know you've done a lot of crayon drawings, Kat. I'm wondering if that was something that helped you, because it certainly did help me.
Yeah, it definitely did. I was able to see the color less for the color of it literally, but more for the value and the warmth of that color and how those, not, how do I say it? How those values is not the word I wanted to use, but how all those things mix together once you layer them. That's actually very good advice. I was thinking back to this time where I was struggling to tell a student, stop using stereotypical flesh tones for your portraits because they all look like plastic Barbies. They don't look alive. But that student was just so stuck in using a brown or an off brown or a tan or a yellow to put in color. I don't think this helped them immediately, but I was like, okay, you see that really bright yellow and you see that ultramarine blue, don't mix it, put it in the portrait. And the portrait came out so ugly.
Maybe you gave the wrong advice, Kat.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I think my mindset was right. I think the track was right, but maybe not that action. I'm still trying to troubleshoot what else could have been good. And maybe what could have been better is handing the student a set of colors like Caran d'Ache or marker and say, hey, redraw that portrait, but only using these colors, rather than having them mix it into their oil painting.
Well, this is a really great example from Shirley Angel. I'm working on a color project, bought a lot of sheets of colored paper, and they look different against my red pants than when I hold them up or put them on the floor. Again, that's the reflected light. That's where context is extremely important. If I had a bright yellow background behind me, you probably would not be paying that much attention to my bright shirt, but you are now because it's all like dark browns that are there in the background. So that's another thing to consider. It's not about that one color. It's about how those colors really work together. Question from Butter. I see people differentiate between red, yellow, blue primaries and cyan, magenta, yellow. What's the difference when it comes to color theory? Is this something we should experiment with?
I think that question is still a little vague. I'm not quite sure what the question is asking here. Clara, do you have an answer for this?
Butter, are you talking about how people define primary colors? That some people say cyan, magenta, yellow, those are the primaries. And other people say, no, the primaries are red, yellow, blue. So if you could follow up with that, Butter, we could let you know. That's what I think it is. For me, I've always thought about primaries as yellow, red, and blue. Have you thought about them as something else?
I always think about them in yellow, red, and blue that's given to you as a kid. You know, it's like particularly saturated, bright yellow, red, and blue. As for cyan, magenta, and yellow, I haven't really thought about that much as primaries. I just kind of think of them as offshoots of yellow, red, and blue. Like if I took a yellow and I mix it a little bit with white, or I took a red and I mix it a little bit with white and blue, then it becomes a little bit magenta.
Okay, so Butter says yes, and how people define primaries. To me, the primary colors, and tell us in the comments, have you guys heard of that? And what do you consider to be the primary colors? Because honestly, I'd never really heard of that argument before until fairly recently. I certainly did not learn it when I was in art school. But for me, the way I define primary colors, they're the colors you can't make them. For example, you can make orange, you can make purple, but you can't make blue from mixing two other colors together. And to me, that's why they're primaries. How would you define it, Kat?
I mean, exactly how you would define it too, Clara. But I think maybe the term was also coined when a lot of color and paint making was from traditional, from the earth materials. There are new colors now that are hard to mix, like neon colors. You can't really mix a neon color. You just need to get it straight from the tube, and you can be sure there are so many chemicals in it, and you can be sure it's so bad for the earth, right? There's not really something that's a natural occurring color, depending on where you get it from. But red, yellow, and blue, I think, are natural occurring colors that you cannot make necessarily.
Okay, well, we have a couple theories here. Lisa says cyan, magenta, yellow are printer inks. Jen says, I thought CMYK, mostly related to printing technologies. I think that is. I don't know a lot about printing. But we also have Courtney who says red, yellow, blue are primaries. Cyan, magenta, and yellow is printing to me. Okay, so Starving Artist also says originally red, yellow, blue for paints and pigments, cyan, magenta, yellow for light and photography and computer graphics. Yeah, color so different across industries. Even the terminology, I think, can be extremely different. Anali says, I define primaries as any set of colors that you can make every color in their gamut. I don't know how to say that, sorry. With them,
Gamut.
gamut, without the gamut colors being able to make those original colors. These primaries can be from 3 to infinity. And we have Sarah who says, I've heard this. For example, I often use quinacridone red as my quote base red for oil painting. I find that I can't mix magenta, but I can mix a more true red with it and some cadmium orange. Yes. See, this is where I think learning about color is just so much more effective within the context of a group, because otherwise you're just hearing one point of view on the subject, which is just too big. Like you can't just like learn it from one person. You have to hear about different people's experiences. Reminder to everybody, you've got 10 minutes to get that early bird discount, which ends at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's in 10 minutes. The retail price is $25 for 150 pages. Beginner's Guide to Color. It will be $20 if you sign up in the next 10 minutes. And guess what, Kat? Fred Lynch, who has taught multiple generations of RISD students, you had him, I had him. He said that our guide is conversational in tone, like learning from the experiences of a bunch of friends who are with you in your home studio. And we also have other testimonials from other artist people. It is going to be in the Gumroad page, which I'm going to publish in about 10 minutes. But here it is, and I hope it creates something for all of you that will become a reference that you can keep coming back to over time. No Discord chat tonight because I have to go publish the color ebook. Whew, thank God. Oh my God, my brain has been total mush proofreading it all week, but we're very excited to share it with you. And if I were you, I would go get that early bird discount because it's expiring in 9 minutes. Thank you everybody so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.